Hello and welcome to the Small World Podcast.
Ronald Taylor.
I thought we were gonna do the bit where you say this.
Oh,
week.
you say this week the topic of. Oh, do I say that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is it? The
Oh my gosh.
Well, I'm your
Is
host,
this
Chris
our-
Long,
I feel stressed.
I'm Austin Newborn.
And I'm Nate Pearson.
and this week we have
Ronald Taylor.
Wow!
we got there.
Yay!
Oh
We
man,
did it.
Hey, Ronald.
I'm so bad at this.
It's all right. It's all right.
None of
We're
us
not
are
good at this
professionals.
1 hour later.
Yeah. How long have we been here, Nate?
I don't even know, man.
Well, I uploaded the show notes 40 minutes ago.
Oh, okay.
So,
We're just getting intimate.
yeah.
Yes.
We're getting to know one another.
Yes.
So, Ronald, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Well, so many W words. You get them all twisted.
Feeling
Good
heavy
words.
after Parker's.
Right. Yes. We all went to lunch before the recording.
We did.
Which honestly was very nice. I think we should do that with more guests.
Just taking the Parkers every time.
No, just me.
Yeah, just Ronald.
Just Ronald.
we take Ronald every week.
We're gonna do
and then-
multiple parts, but it'll be like every
We
other
have-
week.
yeah, we
It's
have
Ronald
lunch.
again.
We have lunch with Ronald before any guest.
Okay. So there
You
go.
know, it would be really nice if our other guests wanted to drive an hour away to come join us live and in person. We might even feed you lunch, but that's neither here nor there.
Anti shout out, Trevor.
Yes. Sorry, I was staring at the
You're
camera.
not welcome back.
Dang.
Just kidding.
Not
I'm
welcome
just
on the
kidding.
pod.
So, to kick things off, you know, obviously I plugged in the show notes, I already said, like, right before we started. So, I wanted to start by talking about how you've been bilingual your whole life.
Yeah, dude. I have
Start.
spoken Spanish forever.
different kind of bilingual.
Yeah. No. Both of my parents are deaf, and so I grew up speaking sign language.
Spine language.
Spine language, yeah.
Spine
I'm a
language.
chiropractor bivocationally.
Bivocationally.
Speaking that spine language.
Spine
Oh, no,
language.
but
Good
so
one.
starting at 10 months old, per my mother, I was signing before speaking. So
Wow.
that's pretty
okay.
cool.
That's really cool.
Yeah, dude.
I don't even know how you teach a 10-month-old to start signing.
Same way you teach a 10-month-old starting to learn English.
I mean, okay, yeah, fair.
That's a good point.
Yeah, because I mean, like you look at it, the reason they teach babies sign language is because, like, as a baby, your vocal cords aren't developed enough to formulate words, but you have dexterity in your fingers for the most part. So it's not perfect sign language. There's a reason they call it baby sign language, just because it's like a little drunk person trying to sign. But yeah, it's cool, you know, being able to communicate with my parents that way, all growing up. So
Gotcha. So, what was it like growing up with two deaf parents?
so yeah, it was pretty crazy. My mom and dad split when I was around 1 year old. So it was more so my mom, and I think that kind of led into even more because I was like her interpreter all growing up. And so you really kind of have to grow up quicker than a normal kid does because you're dealing with a lot of conversations that I think normal kids don't have access to, like when it comes to bills and medical issues and things like that. And I think there's a lot more deaf access now. This is actually gonna be like a deaf advocate podcast now. We're just gonna
That's totally
but like there just wasn't really access in the early 2000s and late 90s, and so you have kids having to interpret for their parents. And the same thing goes with Hispanic families and, you know, other bilingual families where your kids are having to take the brunt of it because, you know, places don't want to hire an interpreter to come, you know, interpret for them. So that was really hard growing up. And I think even as a kid, there's a lot of miscommunication, things getting lost in translation because you're using words that aren't a part of a kid's vernacular. And so you're like trying to explain it the best of your ability, and then your parents are like, "What does that mean?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I'm 4." You know, like I don't know what that means. But it was cool. You know, I think it really did push me to grow up sooner. There are a lot of things we can get into that later, but there were a lot of things that really forced me to grow up sooner. But I'm super thankful for it. You know, it's definitely a gifting that a lot of people don't have, and a lot of people don't realize, like, the deaf community is a lot bigger than people realize. So it's definitely, you know, take some time to learn a little bit of sign language. It'll take you far because, I mean, it's based off of English. So it's not like you're having to learn so much more.
So, at what point did you learn English if you were, like, your mother was teaching you ASL?
Yeah, for sure. So my dad lived in Wilson up until I was around 8 or so, and his girlfriend at the time was hearing, and she was an interpreter, and so times where he would babysit me was times that, you know, I would be I'd have access to spoken word. Closed captioning on the television like actually really helped my reading. And because my mom worked so much, I was at a preschool daycare all the time. So
Gotcha.
Okay.
So outside of that, what was your upbringing like? What did that look like?
So yeah, I grew up in a single mom household, single deaf mom household, which provided a lot of difficulty. I've always been a bit heavier growing up, and so it was like there was actually like a trifecta of like being the only white kid in my neighborhood in school, being the big kid, and having the deaf mom. And so like that led to a lot of bullying growing up, and it was really tough because everybody just like she had a deaf tone, and so didn't speak, well because she can't hear herself.
Yeah.
And so you're literally growing up, people just like calling your mom retarded, and like I mean it's just like it was rough. Like kids are just ruthless,
They are.
And so growing up, like we weren't really churched, or I wasn't churched until I was in the first grade. And this is gonna sound really weird, and I promise it's not racist. So I grew up in an all-black school, and I was bullied for being white. Like it was just like you're not one of us, like so on and so forth. And like that's very real. Like that's a super real thing. And one night the Cub Scouts like came and advertised like, hey, you guys are in the first grade, you can be a part of this, so on and so forth. And there were white kids on the brochure. And I was like, dude, like I could meet some other kids that look like me, like as a 6-year-old.
Yeah.
And so we and it looked really cool, like being able to do outdoor things. Like my dad wasn't around, so I wasn't really like around sports like that or like learning anything about fire or knots or camping and things like that. And so it was a really cool outing for me, but it led into like my introduction to the gospel. So there's a family, the Evans family, like they really took me in. They took my mom in and like really took good care of us. Like every time she had to work a double shift or things like that, they would let me stay over at their house. One of the stipulations there was like, if you stay with us over the weekend, like you can come to church with us on Sunday. And it wasn't like a forced thing. I was like, hey, we'd love for you to come to church with us.
There you go.
And so going into there, it was kind of tough to begin with because I was the kid that acted kind of black, and I was a kid that smelled bad. Like we lived in a really low income, apartment complex. And my parents, when you're kids, like your friends are based off of who your parents' friends are, because you're going to do play dates that way. And people were really uncomfortable around my mom. They didn't know how to act around a deaf lady. And so I felt really ostracized at church, but there was a sense of me wanting to like belong because these are other kids that look like me. And so going from there, it was really cool because they kept inviting me to church, and I kept coming, and it was there were parts of it that just really did feel welcoming. Like there was something more to this, and I took the gospel at face value. Like as a 6-year-old, like these adults are telling me this is true, and I was like, yeah, like I don't have any reason to believe that's not true, And there was one guy that was really like vital to me latching on, and his name is Darren Gabriel, and he was the youth pastor at Raleigh Road in the early 2000s. They left in 2006, and in 2003 they were doing VBS, and they were like, hey, you guys can come to VBS. I did not have a ride. Like my mom, was always working. I had trouble with transportation, so he would come and like drive a bus, like a shuttle bus, and go pick kids up from after school care or daycare or summer camp or whatever. So he came and picked us up, and we'd get in the van, and he was like super, super intentional with me. And as a kid, I really I was afraid of men. Like I didn't have a dad present. I was only I was really comfortable with females because that's all I knew, that nurturing mother, So men were really intimidating me. And he was just really intentional. Like it's like every bit of his focus was getting to know more about me, even just in the 10-minute ride to the church. And that spoke wonders. And he would close with like, man, I love you. Like Jesus loves you, And man, that it wrecked me. And so being able to go to VBS and do all those things, and the Lord is really just dragging us slowly back to Raleigh Road. I mean, it was really cool. One of the big issues was finding an interpreter, for my mom to go to church. So she that's the one reason we weren't in church, because she didn't have access to listening to a service or participating. And it was crazy. My third grade math teacher, we got called in for a parent teacher conference. And I don't know if it was anything bad. I did talk a lot in school, so I don't know if it was a reprimanding conference, but she spoke sign language. And her mom, it meant the world to my mom. She had access to meet with this teacher, and turns out she went to Raleigh Road too. And she's like, hey, like if you guys come on Sunday, like I'll interpret for you. And that led into, you know, more things there. And like I was in and out of church. You know, like I said earlier, I didn't really feel welcome. And there were like a couple people that I like would say that were my friends, but there was still like a distance there. You know, we didn't hang out regularly. We just kind of saw each other on Sundays. I kind of was like having to weasel my way in. I was probably annoying. I don't know. But it, you know, it meant a lot to me growing up. And then youth group was it. Like that was a catalyst. Like youth group was a one point in time where like Joe Strange came in and like really loved on everybody well. And I met like my core friend group. And these are like genuine people that like loved me, like, and I loved them, and we loved the gospel and just really encouraged each other. And like as we got in high school, started driving and things, you know, we were hanging out outside of school, outside of church, and it was like the first time I really felt like I was a part of a community. And seeing that community lived out there, you know, really pushes you toward the gospel, because that's what the church is about. You know, it's about fellowship and accountability and discipline. And so yeah, it was really cool. And so yeah, it was tough. It was really tough growing up, paycheck to paycheck, living in, you know, income-based housing. And the Lord really watched out for me. Like middle school, elementary school, high school, like there's really no reason why I should be in a place of leadership right now, or like that God would save me, because everything outside of those people inviting me to church and like being intentional, like just the small things, like, hey, come to church, or hey, like Jesus loves you. Like those small things lead to way bigger things happening in your life, and like the Lord doing a big work in you. So
yeah, for sure. So I wanted to go back for a second and talk about that community you had in the youth group, because that youth group was probably the healthiest of Raleigh Road's existence.
Yeah, it was super cool, man. And there was 12 of us. And the reason I remember that is because when I got into high school, Joe started this Sunday night Bible study called The Dirty Dozen. And we went through a book together, and it was 12 of us students, and we all just like, yeah, we were so tight. I mean, through middle school, through high school, and some of us, like some families would come and go. But man, it was unbelievable. Like I had never met people that really loved Jesus and really loved each other like that. And I still like have a fondness for all of them. You know, like a lot of us have kind of like parted ways. Some of us worked at camp together. But a lot of us have kind of parted ways, but they're all like fond memories, and like keeping up with them over social media and everything. But yeah, I mean, there really was nothing like it. Like we really were like a core dynamic. For sure.
That's like super rare.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you know, and I'm blessed. Like shout out to New Bethel Youth, because my students it was really cool to see that. We've been there for 4 years now, and you never realize how rare that is until you work in ministry. Like working at camp, seeing some youth groups tight, and seeing some youth groups where they really didn't know each other, or even like where the youth pastor didn't know their students. And I was like, man, like how do you meet with these kids on a regular basis? Like, do you see them outside of school? Like, do you have a relationship with them? And being able to like, you know, come in, it really did. It took about 2 years for us to kind of get into a rhythm of like our kids really meshing and us meshing with our kids. But it's something that I'm really proud to say, like, we definitely had nothing to do with it, but like our kids really mesh like that, just on a smaller spectrum. But yeah, it's super rare, and I'm forever blessed and thankful for like the memories that I've made with those guys and girls. So
yeah, for sure. So what do you think held that bond together?
I really think it was like the events and the consistency of our leadership. So Joe was like, he was really consistent in Bible studies, like at his house, making sure that like we all had events to do, like summer camp. Well, I mean, not summer camp, but summertime was really busy for us, and we had the resources to do that. But other than that, like I just the gospel. Like I really do think it was solely the gospel, because a few of us, we just wouldn't hang out. I think especially for me, like I went to Beddingfield, like I was like the one black sheep of the church, you know, like there was nobody else from Beddingfield. Nobody else went to Darden. Like nobody else, you know, is from that side of town. I'm driving 15 minutes to get to places. So outside of Raleigh Road and outside of the gospel, like a lot of us would never cross paths, you know, but the gospel is that one thing. It's like, it just happened to be God brought these people to himself, like brought these kids to himself. And we saw that, you know, we grabbed onto that, and we were like, well, we're not going to do this alone. And I mean, he really just did a work in us. Like, it really was the gospel. Like, nothing really outside of that.
That's awesome.
That's amazing. It's really the only thing that can do that, though.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, we saw that at summer camp, too. Like, I mean, people it went from, you know, kids in Wilson that wouldn't normally hang out together to working at Sonoma. And it's, you know, college-age kids from all over the country doing ministry together. And some of my best friends are from Florida and Tennessee and other parts of North Carolina and Georgia, you know. Like, my wife is from Georgia. We would have never crossed paths outside of the ministry that is Snowbird Outfitters.
Wish she could be here today.
Yeah, I know. I feel her in spirit.
For the video, she's just off camera.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was about to say at the beginning, you might have heard her for a split second, but she's, you know.
Yeah.
So.
Thanks for joining us today, Rachel. So when you were in high school, you also had a job, right?
So not in high school. I was actually right out of high school.
Okay.
Yeah. So I had just finished my internship at Raleigh Road for the summer, and I was coming out into another
He knows
job.
where this is going.
Yeah.
That's why he left.
And so I started working at Carmike Cinemas, and anti shout out. And I think me and Chris developed the word diss.
Diss, yes. That is the anti-shout-out word.
So ultimate diss to Carmike Cinemas and the leadership there at that point in time.
Carmike don't really exist anymore.
No,
right?
yeah, for good reason.
AMC
bought it
For
out.
good reason.
Carmikes were always so bad whenever I went in.
Man, it was horrible.
Let's hear more about the trashing of Carmike.
Carmike's
Yeah,
gonna
my interest is
resurrect and
peaked
destroy
now,
the
so.
small world.
You're gonna get a cease and
Yeah.
desist from
Carmike is not invited on the pod.
No.
Mr.
Never.
Carmike.
Yeah.
Mr. Carmike.
So
you're
I,
not invited.
There was a point in time, because I know where this is going. There was a point in time when I was working at Carmike that I just wasn't catching hours. Like, I wasn't getting a lot. I was like working maybe 2 hours a week, and it just like wasn't sustainable. Like, I was helping my mom, you know, with some bills and things like that. And one of my friends said, "Hey, like, I'm working at Pino's and we need another delivery driver. Like, if you want to come work with us." And the guy that was owning the shop said, "Hey, like, if whenever you want to start, you can come start." And so I had a shift the next day at Carmike, and I called one of our assistant managers, and I said, "Hey, like, you know, I've got another job. I just wanted to call in to put my 2 weeks in, you know, if that's okay and everything." And she's like, "Yeah, don't even worry about that. Like, can you come do your shift tomorrow?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely, no worries." Like, I was planning on coming in anyway because I was just putting in my 2 weeks. So I get to work, and nothing really seemed out of the ordinary for me. Like, I was just like super oblivious, trying to do my job, and things kind of start clicking together after the fact. So I work the cash register. So I was working concessions, you know, getting people their tickets, their stuff. And the way we kind of did things was to preface for a little bit, when you work a cash register, you log into the cash register like you do everywhere else, and then you're accountable for that cash register. Well, a lot of what we did at work was whenever we would get somebody their tickets, sometimes we would go get their stuff, get their drinks and popcorn, and somebody else would work the register and get the next guest. Sometimes we're just working multiple registers. It doesn't really matter. We're just logged in regardless.
Yeah.
Well, at one point, one of my team leads came over and said, "Hey, the manager, I'm not going to disclose names. The manager wanted me to show you how to change out syrups, like drink syrups. So let's go into the back." And we were swamped. Like, it was snowing, and so people were just like coming to the movie theaters to get out of the weather.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Dude, today's my last day. Like, why does she want you to show me this?" He's like, "I don't know. Like, just come on. I'm just doing what I'm told." And so we went back there, and he didn't even show me anything. He was just like, "Yeah, you undo the nozzle, change out the bag, put a new one in." And that was it. Like, it was just like super brief, just kind of like, you know, now saying just trying to get me out of the way. And so we came back and everything per normal, and it kind of died down a little bit. And our manager came out, and she was standing beside me. She was standing beside me at the concession stand and kind of like trying to create awkward small talk. And I was like, "Oh, this is kind of cool. Like, you've never been out here. Like, I've never had conversation with you. Like, it's kind of strange." And I was supposed to close that night, and it was probably 6 o'clock in the evening, and it kind of slowed down a little bit. And she was like, "Yeah, you can go ahead and go home. We're just gonna let you go home early and close out with a smaller staff." to me, it made sense because it was slow. I had never closed before. It was my first night closing, and it was my last day. So it's like I really didn't need to learn how to close anyway.
Yeah.
So went home like completely normal, like so oblivious. And this was July 29th of 2013. And fast forward 2 weeks, I am dating a girl that I like knew in high school, and we like ran into each other at a pizza place one day, and like I got her number, and we just like started talking. And so at this point we're dating, and we were gonna go see the premiere of Frozen.
Not Frozen.
Oh,
So we
man.
literally we walk into the movie theater, and all of a sudden like I felt like it was just awkward. Like my assistant managers were like hanging up a banner in the foyer.
Yeah.
And they looked back and they saw me walk in, and they like climbed down the ladder and ran into the office. And then the manager came out, and she was like, "Hey, like, you know, good to see you. How you been?" Like creating small talk. She's like, "Hey, don't worry about your tickets. Like we got your tickets because like when you're on staff, you get free tickets and concessions."
Yeah.
And so I was like, "Hey, that's awesome. Like super cool. Like thank you so much." And we go into the movie theater. And I mean, not even 2 minutes into the movie, like they're chopping ice, like in the movie, and a cop walks in, and he like walks up into the up the ramp, and he's kind of scanning the room a little bit, and we're like on the second row from the door, so I mean, I'm like eye to eye with him, and so I'm like, oh, somebody's in trouble, like just complete. I mean, like no idea what's going on, and he comes over to me, he's like, "Hey, are you Ronald Taylor?" I was like, "Yeah," and he's like, "Hey, can I speak to you in the hallway?" I was like, "Yeah, for sure." And I told Sarah I'd be right back. And I thought something was wrong with my mom. Like I thought he was like, "Hey, something happened with your mom," so on and so forth. So I was like kind of worried. I get into the hallway, and I mean, he cuts to the chase. Like he turns me around and like puts my hands around my back, and it's like, "I've got a warrant for your arrest," and like cuffs me. And I was like, "You got the wrong guy." And he's like, "Is this your address? Is this where you went to school? Is this your other place of employment?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's me, but handcuffing, not me. I didn't do anything." And he just kept saying like, "I've got a warrant for your arrest. Like you'll have your day in court." And I was like, "What did I do? Like I didn't do anything. Like what are you trying to arrest me for?"
Yeah.
And he just wouldn't tell me anything. Like,
Oh my gosh.
Just like completely like blowing me off, not giving me the time of day. And I was, doing my best to be completely cooperative with him. Like I was scared, dude. Like stomach in my throat, like knots, freaking out. And I was like, "Well, first of all, can I go tell Sarah that she needs to she needs to follow us to wherever we're going, because like this is not okay." And it got to a point where he just like, "Yeah, it's got something to do with a credit card." And when he said that, I had like immediate relief, because I was like, I don't have a credit card. Like I don't own a credit card. Like I thought he was trying to arrest me because like I hadn't paid a credit card bill or something like that.
Yeah.
I was like, "Dude, I don't even own a credit card. I don't know what you're talking about." And he's like, "You'll have your day in court. You'll have your day in court." Like, wouldn't give me any more information.
Oh my goodness.
And he was trying to be really civil with me. He was like he was the detective on the case, and he's like, "Yeah, I'll let you sit up front. Like, I'll put your handcuffs in the front. All that jazz and everything." So we get over to the police station, and it's just a huge process. Like, there's multiple people, so you're like going in different corridors and things like that. And we finally get up to the magistrate, and he's like, "Hey, like I want to request $1,000, or no," he's like, "I just want to request an unsecured bond for him," which for people that don't know that just means like there's a secured bond and an unsecured bond. So unsecured bond means there's a bond set on you just to kind of like make sure you show up to court, but unsecured means you just sign a piece of paper and go home and then show up to court. Secured bond is you're going to jail until you can make bail.
Oh wow.
And so he was like, "I want to request unsecured bond." He's been really good. Like, we haven't had any issues with him. He's been really cooperative. And the magistrate was like, "Okay, yeah, that's fine." And I've not said 2 words. Like, I have no idea what's happening. Like, that was the first time I'd ever heard the word magistrate. Like, I had no idea what was going on. And so he's like, "Okay, yeah." He told the detective, "Just go in that drawer." It was like a file cabinet right by the window. And he said, "Just go in there, fill out the paper for unsecured bond, and we'll let him go." He opens up the drawer, and it's empty.
Oh.
And he was like, he's like, "There's no more forms here." And he's like, "Okay, well, you need to go into the other office and make some copies and bring them back." And he was just like, "Secured bond."
Oh.
And so he like took me back out there, and like we're making our way toward booking. And my buddy Tyler was like working the desk
Wow.
for booking. And so like all of the doors have like a really, really tiny peephole that you can kind of see through just to make sure there's nobody else in the other room. And we kind of make eye contact, and he like does a double take, and he kind of just mouths like, "What are you doing in here?" And I was like, I have no idea. And it's like, I know people say that, but I genuinely don't. Like, I have no idea why I'm here. And so we get up there, and it was really cool though, because he kind of pointed me to the best bail bondsman. He was like, "Hey, like, he's like, I believe you. Like, I don't know what is going on." But he's like, "Man, God's got you here for a purpose. Like, he's got you here for a reason, so just be patient, and like, you'll see it through." And it was really, I don't even know if he remembers saying that, but it like, man, that spoke to me. And so he was like, "I'll keep you out here as long as I can, but if anybody else comes to get booked, I got to put you in the holding cell." And so sure enough, somebody else came through. And so I get fingerprinted, my mugshot, like whole 9 yards. And I go into the holding cell. And it was funny because it was like a movie, dude. Like, there's a guy taking a dump. Like, there's a guy doing push-ups. And there's a couple of guys just kind of like trying to get some sleep on the bench.
Yeah.
And it was crazy though, because like I sat down and I wasn't freaked out at that point. I was just kind of like, I'm here. And so I like was in like some guy tried to strike up conversation with me. And he was like, "So what are you in here for?" I was like, "Dude, I have no idea." And I'm like 18 at this point. And I was like, "Dude, I really have no idea. Like, they just arrested me." And he was like, "Yeah, F the police." Like, so forth. And I was like, "So what are you in here for?" He's like, "Man, like," he's like, "I was at my job." I mean, he was wearing like an apron and everything. He's like, I was at my job, and they came out. My old lady snitched on me, and they came and arrested me while I was doing my smoke break. And I was like, "Well, why did they call you?" He's like, "Man, she snitched on me because I was beating up on her." And I was like, "Maybe you should be beating up on your wife."
You don't get snitched on if you don't hit.
Yeah, dude. And I was like, but it was cool though, because we kind of had we were able to have a little bit of a gospel conversation. Like, "Hey, I'm a Christian. Like, we don't. That's something that you don't do, And we were able to kind of go through that, and the best of my ability as like a freaked out 18-year-old, And sure enough, like a few hours later, like I made bail. And me and that guy got released at the same time, and I'm like, he's gonna beat me up right now. Like,
I have become his wife.
He's like, yeah.
No.
He was like, I mean, it's like, dude, we're not around the police anymore. Like, I'm like on the side of the street in downtown Wilson.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we went in, and I was like, man, it was super traumatic. Like, we got over there, and so I left that night not knowing anything, and so my mom was there in the parking lot, Joe Strange was there, and my girlfriend was there. And I walk up to Joe's window, and he was like, "Did you do it?" And I was like, "Did I do it? Are you kidding me? Like, what kind of question is that? Obviously, I didn't do anything." And looking back now, like as a youth pastor, I see why he asked that, because some of my kids, I'd be like, "So did you do it though?" But yeah, I was like, "Dude, I have no idea." And it actually, like, that was February 13th. And the next day, like, me and Sarah broke up because, she was in a really bad relationship. And was to a point where just like, had really like trust. We really, both of us should not have been in that relationship at that time. And so she was like, how do I know you're telling the truth? Like, I've dealt with this before. Yeah. But man, God really ordained that, into us, parting ways, and going different avenues of life. And, now I've met my wife, and it was not Sarah. So a month later, we have a court date, and Joe got me hooked up with a lawyer that he does like triathlon stuff with. And he was like, we met up before the court date, and he was like, "You know what? Like, what happened?" And I said, "I have no idea. Like, I genuinely have no idea." And he said, "Well, I believe you. Like, I believe you didn't do anything. Like, Joe believes you, and your church believes you. And so we're going to roll with this." And he just does like civil cases. He doesn't do criminal cases. But he was like, I usually charge $2,000, but I'll do $500. I didn't have $500. And that was a huge blessing in of itself. So like the deacons of my church, like, put money in to help defend me. Oh, wow. Which was really cool. And I had to pay part of that, just to kind of like say that, I'm stepping into this position and owning up to like trying to handle the situation. It wasn't until the morning of my court date that we found out what the charges were. He had been trying to get a police report over and over, was dealing with semantics. So the morning of, like, before we go into the courtroom, he's like, "So what happened is a lady went to purchase a ticket, and when she went to purchase her ticket, somebody used the cash back feature to take $250. And then they pocketed that $250, and she didn't know the difference until she got home and checked her bank statements. The cash register that was used was my register.
Okay.
And so I was immediately accountable for that.
Yeah.
Even though it's like, I'm not thinking of that, and it's like we're all using each other's cash registers. It literally could have been anybody, And so we go in, and to that point, we're meeting. We don't get to see anybody. Like he's back there in the back talking with the DA and other people, doing his thing, like my lawyer. We have to do a second court date. So we go back a month later. Same thing. Like we're not getting any progress. Because you can't move forward with things unless everybody's present. So it's like one day my managers weren't there, one day the victim wasn't there, one day the trooper or the detective wasn't there.
Yeah.
So it's like everybody has to come together to make this happen. 3 months later, like it is the day before my birthday. It is 2 weeks before I'm trying to go to summer camp. Like, and I've also applied to Southeastern Seminary.
Oh my gosh.
And so like all these things are like weighing, on this ending.
Life has moved on.
Dude, yeah, it is crazy. And it's like, and this is 3 months of misery. Like it's 3 months of this looming over my head. It's 3 months of just like feeling hopeless, because if we can't prove my innocence, like I could face charges, and I could have a misdemeanor on my record forever, And so we get to the third trial, or the third court date, and he's talking with the DA, and she was like, I have no idea why this is still a thing. Like I have no idea why this hasn't been dismissed or anything like that. And they said our problem right now is we're not dealing with the victim anymore. We're dealing with the bank. And so somebody has to settle. Like something has to happen.
Yeah.
And so he was like, we can settle in court and just pay the $250 and be done with it and get it expunged off your record and just go about life. And like, dude, my flesh was like, no, like I want to take this to trial and find out who did this. Like I want there to be justice. I want there to be some kind of closure for me, because everything is up in the air and I'm in the dark, like it just like, there's a really, really dark period of my life. And so he was like, he's like, this could go on for years.
Oh my gosh.
Because all the pieces have to come together. There were no cameras in the lobby, so they can't see who was there. The victim said she didn't remember who checked her out. Like, it was just nothing was working in my favor. So nothing was for me and nothing was against me, except for that was my register. And so he's like, dude, we should just settle, because then you can go about your life. You can go to camp. You can do ministry. Like, you can go to Southeastern. You can have no issues. I was like, that sounds fine. Like, I mean, he talked me into it, but I don't have $250. Like, I paid you the only money that I had to represent me. And he was like, man, I'll pay for it.
Wow.
He's like, I'm going to pay for it out of the money that you guys gave me to represent you. And we'll be done with it. And so he did. He settled, and they expunged it from my record, and we were done. And so, like, even to this day, like, I have no idea who did it. And what's crazy, though, is come to find out, like, money was being stolen from the theater beforehand. Money was getting stolen after. So it's like somebody in leadership had to have been stealing money.
That's crazy.
And just setting people up, And so, yeah, it was brutal. I got a call from summer camp. Caroline Ellis called me.
Oh, really?
And she was like, hey, so, because like we didn't have any interaction prior, I just came as a camper. She's like, so I see there's like a misdemeanor on your record. Can you explain that? And I was like, I have no idea, because it was before the court date. I was like, I'll let you know as soon as I find out things.
Wow.
And then 2 weeks later, I went to summer camp. So
wow.
Yeah, so it was nuts.
Needless to say, your faith in the justice system is not heavy.
No, and and like I'm 100% pro police. Like I respect our force. I respect the work that people are trying to do. The system's broken now. Like because if I didn't have people in my corner to send me money to get me out of jail, like I would have spent the night in jail, and then I would have been in jail for a month until my court date.
Oh my word! And
like,
you'd have done absolutely nothing.
Innocent. And like there are innocent people now that are in jail that are just poor. Like they can't afford to bail out. They can't afford to do these things. And then it's like, for the same thing as me, like theoretically, had I sat, and went to that first court date and nobody showed up, I would have gone back to jail for another month.
Oh, wow.
And it's like 90 days in jail for something I didn't do.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's broken. Like it's severely flawed. And there are men that, and women that are suffering for things they didn't do just because they were dealt less cards in life.
Right.
Oh, yeah. And think of like how many people have been framed like that.
Yeah.
Like, you know, that happens all the time, especially with cashiers and stuff like that. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
mm-hmm.
So you mentioned summer camp. So your next phase of life was moving on to Snowbird Wilderness Outfitters.
Yeah, shout out to SWO.
Shout out. To
So I actually did a year at I went straight to SWO because I did Southeastern after my first summer.
yes.
I went and worked at camp, and man, it was incredible. Like it was just such a cool environment for me to be able to kind of feel like I was able to give back to what I had received as a student. Like I went for the first time in 2007, and it was the first time I had genuinely seen like college age men and women like radically and genuinely living out their faith. And it shook me because, you know, Raleigh Road is an incredible church, but there were a lot of people that I saw that were one way at church and one way outside of church. And when you're a kid, it's like, that's confusing, you know, like for us not to be genuine inside and outside of church, it's confusing for a student. And then especially with the notion of college age kids are just crazy. They're going to party and do whatever they want. It's like these kids are making like no money to work a summer to do really, really like intense discipleship and intentional discipleship. Like we first pulled up, this guy comes up and he's serving overseas right now. Like still a really good friend of mine. And he sat down beside me on the bus and I was like, hey man, I'm Blueberry. Like, what's your name? And we got to talking and then he like stuck with me all week. Like ate meals with us, like sought us out every time he saw us. And like, you don't see that anywhere else. Like that intentional discipleship was just unreal. And I went home like changed. So I was like, dude, like, I think I just got saved again. You know, like this is crazy. And it really did challenge me to take my faith seriously, you know, and to pursue holiness. And so I really wanted to do that again once I kind of got into college. Yeah. And it was awesome, man. Like to be around a community of people that are genuinely like studying scripture every day, praying together, memorizing scripture, and like genuinely loving to hang out with students, to do rec, and to pray with them and to hear about them. You know, and so yeah, it was awesome. It was an incredible summer. Pretty much all of my groomsmen I met at camp. You know, it's just like true brotherhood, true friendship. So yeah, it was awesome.
Bless you. So after your first summer, you went back to Southeastern.
Yeah.
Right?
So I came into the young adults program at Raleigh Road, and it was called Crossroads at the time. And Patrick Van Hook was just in the group with us, and he was like, look, I'm thinking about going to seminary. Like I want to get, you know, some theological training. And he was just like, hey, like, you know, he kind of took me under his wing, hung out with me, like really invested in me. I was like, hey, like, you want to come with me? And I was like, yeah. I have no idea what this place is. Like, I honestly, like, I had never really heard of seminary. I didn't know that Southeastern was in Wake Forest. Like, I didn't even know it existed there. And we pull up, and I was like, this place is incredible. Like, this is 30 minutes from our house. Like, what the heck is going on? And coming to find out, like, he ended up not going. It was his tour. He ended up not going, and I ended up submitting an application to go that fall. Oh, wow. And so I'm at summer camp. Like, I'm calling admissions. I'm calling housing. I'm trying to get everything set up. Yeah. And, yeah, sure enough, like, God ordained it to where I was able to go in the fall. And it was awesome. Like, the other half of my groomsmen squad is my Southeastern guys.
There you go.
And so shout out to Southeastern. And so yeah, it was really cool. And coming into my second summer, I knew that I wanted to do a gap year. I knew I wanted to do the internship, like year-round at SWO, and to really disciple guys and kind of learn more from the directors and teaching at camp, because I knew I wanted to go into ministry. Yeah. And so I spoke to my advisor, and he was like, you're an idiot. He was like, a gap year, give me a break. Like, you need to finish your education and then do ministry. And I was like, bump the man. I'm going to do a gap year. And so, yeah, so I went and worked that summer and did an internship. And the director at camp was like, hey, man, like we went to lunch one day. And he's like, what do you think about being here kind of indefinitely? And I was like, dude, that you literally just like, is this a dream? Like, pinch me. I would love to do that. And so I did. Like, I stayed for another couple of years and just did ministry there and learned so much. Like, learned how to teach, learned how to study well. Got to really listen and like be shepherded by guys that really take the faith seriously. And there were ups and downs there, like it just in dealing with people in a close circle, like there's always ups and downs. But it was so pivotal, and it was pivotal to like me just learning trades and stuff too. Like I learned how to do some construction, I learned how to do maintenance, I learned how to back a trailer, I learned how to drive a bus and drive a boat, and like all these things that I wouldn't do with my raising, and it's like it's really cool to see how the Lord orchestrated all these things, and that even brought me to the job that I have now. Like I and my wife, like I met Rachel at camp, and we really hit it. She's upset I didn't give her the plug instantly.
Everything else that good in my life came, and then Rachel.
I love you, baby. But yeah, so like coming into that and like getting married and trying to move forward from there. And I remember sitting with Zach Mabry at the top of the hill by the coop, and he was like, "So what do you want to do?" Because we had talked about me going full time, but we just couldn't afford what they were offering. Like it was like $600 a month,
Wow.
and it's like we can't live off of that. Rachel was still in school. I was still in school. I was doing Western Governors University through all of this.
Oh wow.
And he was like, "So what do you want to do?" And I said, "Man, I really want to go into student ministry." And he was like, "Well, you're in the right place for it because we have student pastors here all the time." And we're like, "All right." Like he's like, "We'll get together after this week of camp and we'll talk." And so I looked down on the basketball court, and you kind of scan to see if there's any other youth pastors there, and you want to like reach out. And that was really like, it wasn't even like, let me try to plug in to work at this church. It was like, it was just our job. You want to find kids, you want to find leaders, you want to be intentional with them to make sure they're taken care of. And so I went down and I saw John, who's the pastor at New Bethel. And I honestly, like, I just recognized his face. Like, I didn't remember his name. I didn't remember what church he was with. I just remembered I had worked with him before. But they had brought a student pastor the last time. And so he had since left, and John brought their youth group. So we get to talking, and he's like, "Yeah, man, like, we just lost our youth pastor, and we're kind of, in the market for another one." And I was like, "You know what? I'm in the market for a job." He's like, let's talk this week. He's like, "Yeah, man." He's like, what days are you free?" So Tuesday afternoon, man, we met together at the Snack Shack, and we talked for like 4 hours.
Oh wow.
And like, man, personality just really meshed, like vision really meshed, like small rural church, but really in need of the gospel and a student ministry, like to develop. Like there were kids there that needed, he's like, we don't expect much from you. We can't give you much. He's like, "We've got a house you can live in, and we'll try to pay you what we can. These kids just need somebody to hang out with." He's like, "These kids just need somebody to love on them." And sure enough, like we went and visited after summer, and it was cool, man. They just like were super inviting, super loving, like super grateful that we would even show up. They had like a huge meal prepared for us. Like it was crazy. And so, I mean, I just like was in constant prayer about it because it was a huge move. It was a huge transition. We had just gotten married. Like, I mean, it was crazy. And so he was like, "So when can you guys come down?" And Rachel was like, "I ain't going." She's like, you want to move to the middle of nowhere?" "Nah, bro."
It is the middle of nowhere. Can confirm.
We ain't doing that. And she's like, "I want to stay here." And I was like, "Man, I do too. Like my flesh wants to still be in Andrews, but I feel like the Lord is putting, things in motion." And I had interviewed with other churches. We had kind of moved toward things, and like God had just like shut doors and raised red flags like vibrantly for me. And New Bethel was just wide open. And I really felt him tugging us in that direction, but my wife was not on board. And so that was like a big point of contention for us, and us just like really having to like pray together. And it got to the point where I was just like, "You got to trust me. Like, this is not me. I do not want to move here. Like my flesh does not want to move here. But it's not about us. It's not about me. It's not about what I want. And I really feel like the Lord is doing something here." And man, he has like, sorry, I'm gonna cry.
Tears are welcome.
I'm emotional. He has done a huge work at New Bethel, like in our young adults ministry, in our student ministry. Like he is it's been an honor to be a part of what he's done there. And so, we love it.
That's awesome.
I just want to say, like, it's crazy when you're in ministry, the feeling of that call that you have to do something. It's a feeling that you can't like explain.
Oh yeah.
Because it's like a tug. You feel like you're being pulled somewhere, and that's outside of your control. I just want to say I can relate to that. That's like and it's like you know, you have your own plans made up in your mind.
Yeah.
And then it's just like a 360. But yeah.
Yeah, and it's wild because, you know, so often we're told, you can't just say God told you.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, you can't use it as a cop-out because everybody says, oh, that's a cop-out. But it's like, man, it really is. Like, it's something that, like, God is really evident. Because for me, it's like, there's no audible, hey, go here, do this. Yeah. But it's, hey, doors are opening and shutting. And I'm going to use that as, like, you're a little mouse in a maze, and you're just going to go where I tell you. You know, and he really did that with New Bethel. Like, he did that in that calling. So.
Nice.
I remember getting a call from you when I was at Dunkin' Donuts studying for an exam, and you were like, hey, I'm thinking about going one of two places, and I think I'm going to go to this other place, but I'm not sure if it's going to work out, and it didn't work out. And so you ended up to where you are.
Yeah, and it's crazy. And it's like, and those were like huge red flags, you know, and that obviously, like, that church was incredible. Those people were incredible. Like, they were loving, you know, 100%. But there was just like politics and like things behind the scenes that weren't balanced well. And so you can kind of tell it would just be a situation that wouldn't be the best to come into, especially your first year of vocational ministry. Because, I mean, we had been working at camp for 4 years by then. And so we've really been steeped into camp ministry. But camp ministry and church ministry are two completely different things. Because you go from living in a community and seeing kids, different kids every week, to coming and working at a church and having the same kids every single day. You know, and you're always like, in ministry, you're always being watched. You know, like, there's always an expectation. There's always something else there, and people are always waiting for you to fail. You know, maybe not necessarily in your church, but just in your community. You know, it's an unfortunate reality of the flesh and the fall. And so, yeah, it was really different. And I think New Bethel was a perfect place for us to come into that because it was a blank slate. Like, they hadn't had a legitimate youth ministry in forever, so I could come in and do what we wanted to do and what we thought would be best rather than trying to meet expectations and things like that. So,
Gotcha. So where are y'all at now?
So we're still at New Bethel. I'm the student pastor there, and we just hit our 4-year mark at March 13th.
Congrats.
And we literally moved in to the parsonage in the middle of a snowstorm.
Oh wow!
So,
what a move!
So we had a minibus that we borrowed from camp.
Nice.
And our vehicles, and we literally just shoved all of our belongings in our small mountain house into this minibus, like from floor to ceiling.
Wow.
And we got slammed with snow when we hit Durham.
Oh wow!
And it ended up being like 9 inches of snow. And we're like trying to move our stuff into this house in the middle of a snowstorm. Like,
oh man,
yeah, it was crazy. It was a super good time though.
So what's next?
So right now, man, we the Lord is still, he's got us here at New Bethel. We, from the get-go, we wanted to not be a statistic. We wanted to, you know, so often youth pastors come in and it's either like a transition stage, a way for them to hone their teaching, or for like a stepping stone for them to move up into ministry. And so the average like span of a student pastor to stay in a position is like a year and a half. And you see, like, studies would say that 2 years is how long it takes for you to kind of set into a groove with your youth ministry in your church. And not very many student pastors meet that. And so when Rachel and I, you know, kind of made the decision that we're going to do this and we're going to be obedient to that call, coming into New Bethel, we were like, we want to at least be there for like 5 to 7 years. And the Lord he's honored that. You know, he has brought that to fruition. And so we obviously can never say anything definitive, but we want to be listening to that. We want to be, you know, keeping our eyes open for open doors to wherever he might call us. But as of right now, you know, we're still at Bethel. So.
Yeah, I think that's a good time frame. I mean, dude, I read some studies. Not that you can put a study on God,
right, yeah,
but
for sure.
they like what they found was, you know, 2 years settling in, but then like 5 years you can start to make a change. 7 years you see like true change, and like, you know, so
yeah, that and I don't know. I'm thinking back to my high school youth pastor. It's funny, he went into the youth pastor position and with the idea, you know, well, it's kind of a stepping stone. He wanted to be a youth pastor, but you know, you didn't really know. He started there, let's put it this way, he started there in the early 90s and he was my youth pastor. And
that's awesome.
And he's like, I never thought that would happen to me. And he's like, I always was ready to go, but all the doors were always shut. And he's like, I'm supposed to be here. and he was a huge influence in my life. Bruce, I don't know if you're listening. Bruce, you were a huge influence in my life.
Shout out to Bruce. Anytime you want to come on the pod.
That's an idea. Inside joke. That's an idea. But yeah, and I remember him telling me one time, he was saying how, youth ministry, it can be discouraging at times. So one time they literally just got their passports and was like, just see what happened. Yeah. And they're still there. And he was like, this is where I'm supposed to be. Like,
yeah, it's so cool. And like, I think coming into camp, like, and just coming, up into age, realizing like, regardless of what our student pastors do, how good they do or how bad they do, like, because they're in that position, and as long as they're preaching the gospel, like, discipleship is happening. Yeah. Because I think there was a point in time where like I really wanted like one-on-one, like intense discipleship, like practicality, showing me how to really do things, and I never really got that. And it's because Joe was juggling so much, like he was like way overwhelmed with everything he was doing at the church, but realizing, man, like the way he like loved his family, the way he loved us, the way he like led, like was discipleship. It was indirect discipleship, but he was leading and showing us, and he was shepherding us well. And we saw that through, man, that core group of people that we had, like he was faithful to the gospel. And we're teaching through Philippians right now. And in the first chapter of Philippians, Paul's like, he's in prison. He's like tethered to the soldier, 18 inches of chain between him, 2 years of 24/7 coverage, right? And he's writing this letter to the church in Philippi, and he says, there are people that are full of envy and jealousy, and they want to see me fail, and they're preaching against me, but the gospel is being preached, and in that I rejoice. And it's like, dude, how humbling for him to be so constant in his faith, and to take all these things that he could gripe about and complain about and be this like the downfall of his witness, and he turns it into something that he rejoices for. Right. And it's like there are so many things we can complain about, but we got to look at like the goodness and the gospel through these things, because in that, we can rejoice through all things.
Yeah, because we're not promised glamorous amazing lives.
Yeah, that's right.
We're just here to literally give glory to God. Yeah. And that may mean we have a boring, mediocre life, but if we're progressing the gospel, progressing his kingdom, that's what we're here for. Yeah. So just because you're a Christian, everything's not going to be great and happy, even though that's taught a lot, but that's what it is.
In fact, the world is promised to have troubles.
Yeah, exactly. If anything, we're promised the opposite.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, for sure.
Well, before we wrap up, I just wanted to make mention, I'm going to get a little sappy for a second. Ronald has been so instrumental to the foundation of my faith growing up, and I just wanted to take a second to thank you for that, because you're intentional with everything you do, and you were intentional with me growing up, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah, man, for sure.
He's your Bruce.
Yes.
Right? There
Bruce.
You go.
Yes, actually.
Bruce. Yeah, and you had mentioned that when we were on the phone last week, just catching up, and I was like, I kind of was just trying to do some reflecting, and I was like, why is that? Why did that happen? Why did God ordain that? And I think a lot of that was man, growing up in youth, a lot, especially my middle school years, a lot of it wasn't, and even when I was in Kidstown, doing the kid stuff, it was older high school guys, were just intentional to even just say hey to me and involve me in things and activities. And I just remembered how much that meant to me, because I looked up to them. And so for them to meet that expectation of the gospel, just to even make somebody feel included, and it's man, why don't we do that? Why don't we invest in people younger than us? Why don't we invest in people, period? Right. And that was huge. And it's I think the Lord had always developed that passion in my heart for just people, period. And which, led to my calling to be in student ministry. And it just came so easy, you were a fun kid to hang out with, and you were very teachable, you weren't a butthole. You often, at least to me, I bet Jennifer would say otherwise, but I know you just you were super teachable, you wanted to learn, and you wanted that intentionality, it goes both ways. There has to be students that want that intentionality, and there's got to be people that's willing to give it. Right. And that's something that we should all do. There's always somebody watching us. Yeah. Everybody's observing us. and we have to be willing to take that call and take heed to that.
So for those of you watching, find your Ronald, find your Bruce, find your Chris, find your Austin.
Yeah, for real.
That, and also, I mean, just encouraging people like you who are in ministry, who feel like they aren't getting anywhere, they aren't doing anything. Everything you do is influencing somebody.
Yeah, it matters. Everything matters.
Yeah, you may not realize it, but don't look in this little earthly time frame. Look in the eternal time frame, and just think about that in everything. That everybody's God's creation, and this is eternal, not this little moment in life.
Right.
So
yeah, absolutely.
And the impressions you make today last a lifetime.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
So before we wrap up, we're gonna conclude this episode as we do with most, not all episodes.
No,
and I
this
totally
doesn't
would have
work out
forgot.
this
So
way.
thanks, Rachel. But we have a question from Dr. Gregory Scott's Book of Questions.
Here we
Dr.
go.
Scott.
Still haven't brought the physical copy, even though I bought it. It's still not in the studio, even though it should.
It'll show up someday.
You should just stay here.
It should, but like I never
right
think to
on
bring
this
it.
desk.
Just
That's
just
right.
prop it up.
Yeah.
There you
Anyway, question number 5. Would you rather watch an Olympics that outlawed performance-enhancing drugs or one that embraced them and let athletes use medical pit crews to jack up their performances?
Oh, gosh.
Oh, dude, jack it up. Let's bring back that age of baseball.
Oh, man.
Show me the money.
Back in the day, Sammy Sosa and all that. Man.
But like
Baseball.
that added into the meme I saw where it was like there should be one normal person in the Olympics that you compare everyone else to. So it's like that's your average guy.
You see how
There you
insane everybody else is. Have you guys seen those videos where they've been showing those like juicing videos where it's like a video of somebody bunting the ball, but then it crops to somebody hitting a home run? It's like, bring it back. Bring back the 90s.
I heard someone give like a take on sports where they were like, based on how old you are and your athletic ability, they should create a scale on how much you can use in performance enhancing drugs.
It's a sliding scale.
Yeah. So like they said,
man.
like I mean, this is an off the wall reference. People might not get it, but Richard Sherman, he's an old cornerback. He's lost his speed in football. He should be able to juice a lot more. But they said like there should be exceptions for people like Tom Brady because he's already goated. So, like,
Can we just take into account that he said Richard Sherman was a deep cut? I feel like anyone who watches football is
well, I was saying
knows
people who
who
don't
Richard
watch
Sherman is.
sports.
I know what some of these words mean.
People who don't watch sports.
I was like,
I just
sports
remember
ball.
Richard
I
Sherman
love
because
sports. I don't care who knows.
I just remember Richard Sherman because he screamed into the camera after the Super Bowl. Or was it the playoffs?
It was after the Western Conference or the Western Conference, the NFC Championship.
What did he say? I can't remember.
I'm going to Disney World.
That's why you put a sorry receiver like Michael Crabtree on me. Something like that. It was about Michael Crabtree.
Oh, I'm the best corner in the
Yes.
game. Ah, that's what it was.
That's what happens when you put a
They
sorry
fell off
receiver
the
like
next
Crabtree
year.
on me.
No, it wasn't quite that soon, but-
It'd be great if they moved him to safety, but this isn't a sports podcast.
No, it's not. It is not.
Not like initially thought, huh?
No. I mean, you
So-
already brought up early 90s baseball. I'll go on that forever. So.
Oh man. Yeah, so like even like in our prior talks, I completely forgot this conversation happened, but Ronald mentioned the last time that we kind of hung out in person, I had talked about wanting to do a podcast, and here we are. It's
Doing a
not a sports
podcast.
podcast.
Yeah, and it's wild because we were in my living room, and you're like, yeah, I'm thinking about doing a podcast. And I was like, dude, I would love to do a podcast. And you're like, it's going to be about sports. And I was like, I don't sports. So I was like, I can't do that podcast with you.
You played
There you
hockey.
I did, but I don't sports. Like, I don't do, like, statistics, and, like, I don't watch sports regularly like that. Like,
Yeah.
that is not my
So what I'm hearing
field of
is
expertise.
you don't read the East Carolinian.
Oh,
I do,
man.
though.
Oh, you do?
Because you post it, and your mom posts it,
Oh, there
and I
you
follow
go.
both of you on social media.
There you go. There
So
you
I
go.
gotta, I gotta support my boy, you know.
I appreciate it. Those statistics are fire. Look out for my opinion article this week on why the Oxford comma is necessary.
There you go.
And it is.
It is.
I
You're a
I
sports
endorse this
reporter?
message.
This week is sponsored by the Oxford comma.
We just lost a percentage of our audience.
Yeah.
Look,
Oxford
I
comma
hate the
haters.
Oxford comma.
If
Gone.
the Oxford comma haters
we
Unfollow.
don't,
Follow.
yeah, we don't need ignorant people on this pod.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Bye. Don't let the door.
Let's
hit
eat
you
grandma.
on the way out.
Oh man. Oh, let's eat grandma. Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
word.
These are my parents, cat and dog. Are your parents named Cat and Dog? I don't know because you didn't put the comma
That's
there
right.
to
And
make
that's
it a
the,
series.
That's the true use of the Oxford comma.
Right.
There you
Yeah.
go. There you go.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So thanks for coming on the pod. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. I am a huge fan of Small World Podcast.
We appreciate
It is
it.
an honor to be here for sure.
We'll have you on again at some point. I know I say that with most guests, but we will definitely have you on again.
Yeah, because I'll actually drive on like Trevor.
Yeah, Trevor. He might not even be watching this episode. He was only here for laughter.
He's like, I've done my time. I don't even like that podcast anyway. It's boring.
That's why I was worried about bringing you on. I was like, what if he stops listening now that he's been a guest?
That was his old goal.
It's like, I'm on it now. I'm done.
Trevor just listens to his podcast over and over again.
On repeat.
This is the best episode.
Why does your episode have 300 plays?
And they're
opens
all
up
from
multiple,
an hour away.
Opens up multiple Spotify accounts to get views.
He's like, yes, I will be the biggest Small World episode. Just kidding. We love you, Trevor.
Yep.
Anyway.
Wow.
Here we go again.
All right. Well, that's it. Podcast out.
Yep.
Peace.
Peace.